Welcome to the channel. So sometime back I upgraded my Husqvarna garden tractor with the poor man's power steering setup. So I upgraded the steering spindles with needle bearings and the front wheels with ball bearings, and I've been really happy with that setup. In the last video that I published on that topic, I included a lot of details on the upgrade kits themselves and how they can actually save you time and money. But this video is really meant to be more of an instructional video specifically for John Deere owners. As you can see behind me, I have a brand new John Deere S100. This is a nice little mower, but I'm actually not planning to keep it long term. I actually bought the mower just to develop some new upgrade kits and to do a little bit of testing. And I'll probably make a couple of videos with this mower, and then I plan to sell it on. So today I'm going to be installing the complete Poor Man's Power Steering upgrade kit, which consists of the needle bearings and all the hardware components to upgrade the steering spindles, and then wheel bearings and all the associated hardware to upgrade the wheels. Now this mower, believe it or not, hopefully you can see that, it has 0.0 hours on it. I mean, it is brand new. There's virtually no scratches on it. I was really lucky. I found this at Home Depot, and it hadn't been abused by the patrons there yet. The salesman told me they had just taken it off the truck recently from the dealer. Even still has the stickers on the tires. But anyway, let's get this in the shop and we'll get started. All right, well, I got a bit of a surprise when I took off the wheel here. As it turns out, John Deere has been installing sealed bearings into the newer S100s. They also did away with the grease fitting that's normally on the inside of the wheel here. So I guess if you have a newer John Deere mower, all you really need is the steering bearing upgrade kit, but most mowers out there are going to have bushings, and I wanted to demonstrate the improvements that you get by performing both the steering bearing and the wheel bearing upgrades together. So before I get any further, I'm going to go ahead and install a new set of bushings into these wheels, and that way I can make a comparison to the more common configuration. Are you serious? Wow. I guess this is why you don't buy hammers from the Made in China store. I wasn't even hitting this. That's crazy. Okay, so I have bushings installed in both the wheels now, and one thing you'll notice, if I rock the wheel back and forth, you'll see a fair amount of play there. Now, that play is because there has to be a gap between the axle and the bushing. Even though these are brand new bushings, they fit rather loosely because they have to rotate along the axle, so they can't be super tight. The other thing to notice is if I spin the wheel there, there's a fair amount of rolling resistance, and you can actually hear the two metals grinding together between the axle shaft and the bushing. So keep this in mind, and once we replace the bushings with ball bearings, we'll do this again and we'll see the difference. All right, well, I got this brand new mower with new bushings in the front wheels. So before I do any of the upgrades, I wanted to go ahead and take it for a spin and just see how the steering feels in its current configuration. Okay, it's really not too bad. I guess being a brand new mower, it's fairly smooth, but it's not as smooth steering as my Husqvarna garden tractor, which has already been upgraded. So I think there's some room for improvement. I was trying to do the one finger steering, and I was somewhat successful, but it did require a bit of effort there. So I think I can improve that, and also there's quite a bit of slop in the steering, and I think I can improve that as well. So anyway, let's get this back into the shop, and I'll start the upgrades. Okay, so here are all the hardware components included in the steering bearing kit, and all the components included in the wheel bearing kit. And I'll leave links down in the description section because these kits are unique. You're not going to find these exact kits elsewhere online. They're all made with really high quality components. They have pretty good instructions with photographs, and they're even written in correct English, which is kind of a rarity these days. Now, some people just upgrade their steering spindles with these needle bearings and call it a day, but I think a lot of people don't realize that if they have bushings in their front wheels, then upgrading to ball bearings also helps to reduce the steering effort as well. That's because these smooth rolling bearings, they pretty drastically reduce the rolling resistance inside the wheel, which in turn helps to reduce the amount of torque needed to turn those wheels while they're rolling. So if you have bushings in your front wheels, it makes sense to upgrade the steering spindles and the wheels with bearings at the same time. You'll see a much more significant improvement to the steering effort, as well as the way the steering feels overall. And if you get these kits and you can replace the old original hardware like the dust caps and the washers and clips and that way you won't have to worry about replacing those items again for a long time to come. Also, these steering bearing kits, they come with custom washers that will give you a little bit more clearance than the original ones, but I'll show you that a little bit later. Okay, I got my brake engaged, I have the transmission engaged, I have my wheel chocks here, and then here in the front, have it lifted up by that black bracket there. And you want your wheels to be about 4 or 5 inches off the ground. I'm going to start with the wheel bearings. That way, once I remove the wheel, I have easier access to the spindles. And then if I lift the hood, that'll give me more access as well. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is remove this dust cap. And it helps if you add a bit of heat. So I have my heat gun here. That'll help to soften it up in order to remove it a little bit easier. Now, it doesn't take a lot of heat, and so I'm going to be using my heat gun on its lowest setting. And you don't want to get it too close to the cap because that will definitely melt it. Now, if you don't have a heat gun, you can probably use a hair dryer. I think that should work just fine. And to pull it off, once it's kind of softened up, you can just use a screwdriver, but it helps if you have a hooked tool like this cotter pin remover. It can get back in there a little bit easier to remove it. So let's go ahead and turn this on and get it heated up. There we go. Okay, so next I need to get this E-clip off here, and I'm just going to use a flathead screwdriver to put in there and then twist to get some room. Then I can pry it up. Now be careful when they're brand new. They can have a bit of spring to them and they can actually shoot across the room. So watch your eyes. I like to put my thumb up here on the top while I pry this up so it can't go anywhere. And there's the E-clip, and then you have this outer washer, so that has to come off. Now I can take the wheel off. And down in here is another washer that has to come off as well. It's a bit difficult to get in there, so what I found is just use a flathead screwdriver, stick it in there, and just kind of twist. Turn the washer as if you're unscrewing it, and then it'll come right out. You can probably also use a magnet. That might work as well. So now is a great time to inspect your axle shaft for excessive wear. Of course, this is a brand new mower, so that's not a problem, but over time, the bushings will wear down the axle shaft, and you'll get flat spots up here. Now, if it's not too bad, you can take some sandpaper and just kind of roll it over the top and smooth it out before you install your bearings. But if you have excessive wear on the axle, then it's probably advisable to go ahead and replace this axle and steering spindle assembly before you install the bearings. But the good news is after you install bearings, that's not going to be a concern anymore because all the rotation happens within the bearing and not on the axle shaft itself. Okay, so I'm going to use this socket extension to hammer out these bushings. I will, however, use my US made hammer this time and see if it fares any better than my cheap Chinese one. And one thing I should mention is you want to kind of tap all the way around the bushing instead of just hammering on one spot. That will help to reduce the chances that the bushing twists in there, which will potentially widen out the hub. Okay, so that's one bushing. Let's get the other one. There we go. And this is still usable as a socket extension, although it's not my favorite one to use. So there we have it. We got both the bushings out. So now that I have these bushings out of the wheels, I thought I would show you how they fit on the axle. You can see how loose that is, and there's a lot of side-to-side movement. And of course, that's where most of that steering slop comes from. Whereas these precision bearings, they fit nice and snugly. There's almost no side-to-side movement at all. And so you can see that that's why a lot of that steering play goes away once you upgrade to these bearings. So I'm going to go ahead and test fit this, and looks like we're getting a really nice snug fit, which is exactly what you want. Now, if you're not getting a good fit, if they're a bit loose, or maybe you've widened the hub a little bit when you took out the original bushings, it's not a big deal. You can correct that by just gently tapping around the perimeter of the hub with a hammer, with the bearing removed, of course, and that will help to shrink this back down to its proper size. You just want to do a little bit at a time. Of course, if you have a rubber mallet or a rubber dead blow hammer or something like that, that'll probably help to reduce the chances that you'll chip the paint or dent the metal. Now, when you're installing the bearings, you want to be careful not to hit the very edge of the flange. That outer edge will chip if you hit it there. And of course, you don't want to hit the inside here where that rubber seal is. Either of those things are going to destroy the bearing. Now, I found that a 1 1/16 inch socket works really well. It just fits perfectly so that you can make nice even contact around that outer race there without chipping the outer flange or hitting the ball bearings inside underneath that seal. And just like before, I'm going to use a little bit of penetrating oil to help these go in nice and smoothly. Okay, so you want to double check and make sure it's seated properly all the way around, and this one looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and do the same on the other side with the second bearing. Okay, so that one looks well seated as well. So it's as easy as that. We got bearings installed in this wheel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start on the steering spindle upgrade. I want to leave the wheel off for now. We'll get back to that later because with the wheel off I have more access here and I need that access to film. Now again, I'm going to use my heat gun to soften up this dust cap and remove it. And I have the hood pushed forward just to give me a little more space, but also to make sure that I don't melt the hood with my heat gun, because John Deere does like to use plastic hoods for some reason. Now on the larger John Deere mowers, like the X Series garden tractors and that, they have a totally different steering setup. But if your steering setup looks basically like this, then these upgrade kits will work with them. Okay, so these are exactly the same E-clips as they're using on the wheels, so they'll come off the same way. Then I'll remove this top washer here, and I'll go ahead and clean off this grease just so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now I need to separate the spindle at this point, and sometimes you can just push down on it and it'll come right out. So this one's a little stubborn. I think that's probably because it's a brand new one, and these parts really haven't broken in yet. I can probably pull on it a little more, but another option, if you have a stuck spindle, I recommend using a wooden dowel that will fit down into the top of the axle housing. This is going to be soft, so you're not going to risk mushrooming the top of the spindle, because that'll make it difficult to get back in later. So just stick that in there and give it a couple of hits, and there we go. Okay, so I'm wiping off this original grease because I already see debris in it just from driving around the yard. Now, a lot of mowers will have a washer installed down here on the bottom of the steering spindle, and that acts as sort of a bushing between the steering spindle and the bottom of the axle housing. But John Deere doesn't do that. As you can see, there's nothing there, which means that as you're turning, you're basically just grinding away at the axle housing and the steering spindle. So you can see where adding a bearing down here is going to not only help to improve the friction, but also will help your steering spindle and your axle housing last a lot longer as well. Okay, so next I have my steering bearing. This is a needle bearing. So I'm going to put a race on the bottom, and then the needle bearing goes on top of the first race, and then the second race will go on top of that. But I'm going to add a bit of this general purpose grease to each component before I install them. So there's the first race. And here's the needle bearing. And then here is the second race. Now, one thing that I should mention is that these bearing races are bidirectional, meaning that both sides have been highly polished. So it doesn't matter which side touches the bearing, you can flip them either way. So anyway, this bearing stack is about 4 millimeters in height, which means that the amount of space that you have at the top of the spindle is always going to be a bit tight. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble it and see if we need to make any adjustments. Okay, so with the bearing stack in place, if you look at the top of the spindle, you'll see a bit of a groove there, and that groove is for the E-clip, which needs to be installed. But first I need to get this washer in place. Once I get the washer in place, you can see that the groove is no longer accessible. I just don't have enough clearance for it. Now, what's going on here is something I've seen on other John Deere tractors. If you look here, there's a seam. There's another one on the back side, and those are interfering with the washer. And I think these are just left over from the axle housing casting, and they need to be knocked down, so I can do that quite easily with just a standard file. It'll only take a minute or two. But I wanted to point out that these washers that come with the steering bearing kits, they're slightly thinner than the original washers that come with the mower, and they have been heat treated so that they maintain a high level of strength. But having the thinner washer helps a lot with the clearance up here. If I were trying to reuse the original washer, I'd probably have to grind down here on the top of the axle housing a bit more. So these thinner washers are just nice to have. Makes the job go a bit easier. Okay, so I have a paper towel down in the axle housing just to hopefully prevent too many filings from getting down in there. And this is just a standard bastard file. Okay, so I have the spindle temporarily reassembled just to check for fitment. Now I ended up having to file a bit more than I was expecting. That's because after I took care of the seams there, the washer wasn't sitting quite flush. And that's because one side of the top of the housing here was sitting up a bit higher than the other side. So I just took my file and I made sure everything was nice and level and flat. And now this washer sits nice and flush. And hopefully you can see that the full width of that groove is visible now, which means I'll be able to put the E-clip back on rather easily. Now this was not a difficult job or time consuming. It only took me a few minutes with just a hand file, so it's not a big deal, but I would say the majority of mowers out there aren't going to require any kind of file work or grinding, but it does depend a little bit on your particular mower. Now I've taken the paint off of here, and to prevent rust, next I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a bit of spray paint. Now if you have to do any filing, you want to make sure that your spindle and your brand new bearing is well out of the way so you don't get any shavings down in there. And for the axle here, the tube, I have an alcohol wipe in my dowel. I'm just going to stick it down in there and make sure it's nice and clean before I reassemble the spindle. And I've done this a few times already. Now to reassemble the spindle, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on it. And just insert it. And here's where this little jack comes in. You can do this without a jack, of course, but it helps. It kind of acts as a third hand. And also you can put a bit of positive pressure just to make sure that everything down here is seating properly to kind of maximize your clearance at the top of the spindle here for the next step. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and install my washer. I'm going to grease it up first. And that'll go there. So this is what they call a poodle style retention clip, and it holds a bit better than the standard style of E-clips. That's just going to go there into that groove. And take the pliers and just kind of snap it in there. And I always like to take a screwdriver and rotate this just to make sure it's seated properly. And that looks good. And you also want to make sure that you can rotate everything. You shouldn't have any binding up here. This should rotate freely, of course. And I want to go ahead and add a bit more grease up here. Okay, now we just need to get the cap back on. There we go. Okay, now I have my grease gun. I just have standard general purpose grease in here. I'm going to go ahead and grease up the spindle. And you'll start to see grease coming out the bottom. You can also see that grease is actually penetrating through into the bearing and coming out all around it. So that's perfect. Okay, so we are done with the steering spindle upgrade, at least on this side. Okay, so next I just need to install the wheel. So I'm going to take one of the smaller washers from the kit and get some grease on it. And that's going to go onto the shaft and all the way back into that recess. I want to go ahead and put some grease on the shaft as well. Okay, so next I need to install the wheel. Okay, then add some grease to the second small washer. That goes on next. And then add some grease to this large washer. And that goes on there. Then the poodle clip goes on next. Okay, it's nice and seated. Okay, so hopefully you can tell how much smoother and quieter the wheel rolls now, and it'll roll for a really long time with just a little bit of a spin. And that side-to-side motion that we had before, it's completely gone now. Okay, so next I need to get the dust cap back on. Okay, so that wheel install is complete. Okay, as I mentioned before, these wheels do not have any grease fittings. Now, it's entirely up to you, but if you have grease fittings on your wheels, I think it's better to go ahead and grease them at this point. Even though you do have sealed bearings, the grease will help to prevent any moisture from getting inside and causing any oxidation or rust on the internal parts and the axle shaft and that. It also helps to prevent any smaller particulates getting in there and causing problems. So in my opinion, it's just a cheap insurance to go ahead and grease your wheels as you normally would, even though you have these sealed bearings. And while you're at it, it just makes sense to go ahead and lubricate your steering gears as well. And I'm just using general purpose grease for this. Okay, so I have my steering bearing kit installed on this side and my wheel bearing kit installed. And then over here, I have my steering bearing kit installed on this side and my wheel bearing kit installed as well. So now I just need to get the tractor down on the ground and do a bit of testing. Okay, well that really was a quick and simple upgrade, and once you're done, you're going to be tempted to see how much improvement you've made in the steering, but unfortunately, unlike hydraulic power steering, this upgrade really requires the mower to be in motion before you'll feel much of a difference in the steering. Now, once the mower is moving, you will feel a improvement in the steering effort and in the way the steering feels overall. So that's what we're going to check out next. Okay, well, I don't know how well that comes across in camera, but yeah, I definitely made a big improvement here. I mean, that one finger steering was really effortless, and it turns in really fast now, especially when you compare it to when it had bushings. Now, this was a brand new mower, and the steering wasn't bad to begin with. So I think if you're going from an old wore out steering and you do this upgrade, you're going to get a much better improvement. But I'm really happy with the way this turned out. I definitely did make an improvement to the steering effort. Okay, so that was the complete poor man's power steering upgrade on a John Deere mower. Now, if your mower currently has wheel bearings in the front wheels, you can still benefit from the steering bearing kit. But if you're moving from bushings, or maybe your bearings are already wore out and it's time for an upgrade, then the steering bearing kit plus the wheel bearing kit is going to give you a pretty significant improvement to the steering effort and the way the steering feels overall. So that's about all I have for this video. I hope this was useful, and we'll see you next time.